Welcome everyone. Can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, perfect. So thank you for coming and to be here with us today. As you know, we're going to be talking about our fellowship for program for 2020, and we have here with us Sanjukta and Anisa from the Mumbai studio, as well as Ido from our Nairobi studio. And I'm gonna set some like little norms for our space today. And it's like, please everyone mute yourself if you're not talking. Anisa and Ido are gonna be going through some of a presentation that we put together for you guys. And then if you have any questions, we're gonna have a question section at the end. If not, I will be moderating the chat. So at some points, maybe I will, if it's pertinent at the moment, I will interrupt them and ask some of your questions. So yeah, to you guys then.
Cool. Thank you, Male. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. All right, cool. Thank you, Male. Welcome, everyone. We have a lot of people in the house today, so we hope this is going to be a good session and also fun. So please make yourself at home and bring on all the burning questions that you have so we can try to answer as much as we can during this session. So I'll pass it over to Sanjukta to take us away.
Great. I'd always winning with incredible backgrounds, unlike boring ones like mine. So welcome everyone. It's great to see all of you. Just quickly reiterating what Male and Ido said. We do want to make most time for questions, so we will do the context in the first half, but please do engage in the chat. Post your questions. Before we start, I did want to do a quick priming for all of us. So over the years, this is possibly the 5th year we are doing the fellowship. And over the years, the needs of the fellowship has always evolved. So has the process. And what that means is each studio, and we'll come to it in a little bit, what those studios are. Each studio has evolved to have specific needs. So what we will do is definitely give an overview of Dalberg, our work, how we work, what are our core strengths, what are we seeking. We may not have the time to get into all the details of all the positions given the specificity of them. What I do encourage you to do is definitely go to the Dalberg Design website and look at all the details, because all those job descriptions are written with a lot of care and thought from all the team members. So it's not just one person who writes those. We all actually think about who we want and contribute towards doing it. So please do read. And one of us will definitely ping the link to that in the chat. So keep an eye out for it if you don't have it right away. And yeah, we'll hold the questions till the end so that we can get in with the context and then address all your questions as much as possible. Anything you would like to add, Ido, Male, and
No, that sounds great. Nothing to add from my end.
Cool. So I'll start off with a quick introduction of who we are. Not necessarily going into our backgrounds and education qualifications, because I'm sure you all can see that on LinkedIn. But I wanted to talk a little bit about where I came from, which is I worked a lot in social enterprises at the grassroots in maternal and child health, which is also a lot of my focus at Dalberg, which is maternal child health, sexual reproductive health, and a lot to do with gender and technology. What was interesting for me is having spent considerable time in the social enterprises, coming to a consulting firm like Dalberg was really interesting. To go from really granular and implementation-centric work to a systemic change and look at work from a very systems perspective and engage different kinds of stakeholders, actually mobilize them, maybe not always be part of implementation. So yeah, I come from a mixed background of engineering and design. But that's pretty much it for me. I have been with Dalberg since 2017, just like Ido. So over to you, Ido.
Thank you. So my name is Duncan Onyango Adera. I'm a senior designer based out of Nairobi studio. I've been with Dalberg since 2017. And my journey with Dalberg started as a fixer and a translator. So if, you know, the guy, for the folks in the room who understand what that is, I was involved in this project with Dalberg, and my work was to go around and recruit research participants and also translate for the researchers. So this was my first contact with Dalberg and HCD. I mean, before that, my background was in design. I was a web designer, so I was part of the breed of, like, you know, traditional design thinkers, if you want to call it that. But, you know, working with Dalberg really opened my eyes and changed my perspective in terms of, you know, there's a different way of doing design where you put the user at the center of what it is that you're doing, whether you're designing a product or a service, which really gives you valuable insights to their lives, the challenges they face, and, you know, which can be crucial in the adoption and continuous usage of your product. So my journey since 2017 has been kind of an interesting one. I've been involved in very interesting projects across many sectors: health, youth employment, worked a lot with farmers. So I'm becoming a bit of an expert in farming. Might actually become my retirement plan, who knows. So up until now that I'm, you know, I became a designer. Now I'm a senior designer, you know, and the journey continues. And this is similar to many of the folks at Dalberg Design. We have very different backgrounds, very different experiences. We bring in a rich collection of skills, capabilities, which really, you know, adds a lot of richness to the work that we do. So a lot of our stories are different, but, you know, Dalberg Design is this cooking pot that brings all of this experience and ideas and skill sets together to make work that is impactful. So that is my introduction, and nice to meet you all.
Male, would you like to quickly talk about yourself as well?
Sure. So hello everyone. I'm Male I'm gonna turn on my camera so you can see me. From the New York studio. I'm a Colombian designer right now based in New York. I'm a senior designer now at Dalberg, and I started my journey as a fellow, actually. I think many of us do start our journey like that. And I started in 2018, and then I got to be a designer, and now I'm a senior designer. I have worked as well in many different projects, from public health to financial inclusion, to youth education. So it has been an incredible journey. It's an incredible team, an incredible set of projects. Yeah, that's it so far.
Thanks. And with me is Anisa.
Hey everyone, this is Anisa, and I work too with Sanjukta in the Mumbai studio. I've been with Dalberg Design since 2018, and it's been about a year and a half or so. I actually manage the studio here in terms of administration, human resource. And prior to this, I was working with the advisory team, which is Dalberg Advisors, for 5 years as their regional office manager. So it's been a bit of a short leap and jump, and it's been great so far.
Thanks everyone. So jumping off to today, what are we going to do? Basically, we want to take you through a bit of who we are, where you can find us, and talk a little bit about the human-centered design approach that we bring. And to kind of solidify that, share a little bit of our work and some of the project examples. And then coming to the most important part of today is the opportunities that we have in DD. So with that, I'll start us off. Who is Dalberg Design and where you can find us? Sorry about this. Is my screen interrupting the slide deck? Yeah, so we have been around for 5 years now, and it's Dalberg Design. It's a design studio within Dalberg, which is a strategy consulting firm. Dalberg started out almost 19 years ago, and only 5 years ago, we started Dalberg Design. So you can see that we are small, 28 people, but we're also mighty in a lot of ways because we bring, like Ido said, that not everyone is a trained designer, and the reason we are mighty is because we don't all need to be trained designers, because we bring our own strengths. So we have people from qualitative research, behavioral sciences, human rights, and international development backgrounds who basically make the fabric of Dalberg Design. Moving on, Dalberg Design is only one of the verticals within Dalberg. So what is really interesting, and possibly the only design studio that sits with all these other verticals, which is strategy, that brings around analytics, skills to the public and private sectors. Then there is the Dalberg Research, who do a lot of primary research and data collection, and also sometimes monitoring and evaluation. We have Dalberg Data Insights, who work on analytic tools and interpret data. And then there is D-Implement, which ensures the quality delivery of projects. And then, of course, we do a bunch of investment advice as well. But having said that, what's really unique about Dalberg Design is that we are not necessarily championing the cause of design. We're not saying that design is the way to go. What we are definitely saying, though, is that, hey, here is a set of designers who come from many different backgrounds, but there are also these other strengths to pull from that you're seeing on your screens right now. And essentially, every project, how that manifests is every project we put together a team that basically brings the capacity that the project needs. So sometimes projects are design heavy, where you need that kind of intervention. Sometimes they're not, and it is driven by, say, strategy, and design has its own role in that. We have had other collaborations where Dalberg Strategy, Dalberg Design, and Dalberg Data Insights together have collaborated, or Dalberg Research, Design, Data Insights, and Strategy have also collaborated. So we'll come to that, and I think Ido will take us through some of those examples. But truly to say that we are a global group anchored in integrated businesses with very, very specific capabilities that come together to solve for the need. Moving on, we have a global footprint with design studios in London, Mumbai, Nairobi, and New York City. In the website, you will see the specific needs in the fellowship program of all these studios. But what is very, very interesting for me personally is that since the beginning, and we are only kind of getting better at it, is there is like a 60-40 split in the men and women ratio of our work culture, including the leadership. And I think that in itself is basically, to me, speaks to the value of walking the walk. So yeah, we share a lot of common values. And just before we were getting onto this webinar, I was trying to brainstorm with my colleagues here who are also on this call, how to not make this preachy. Like, it's great we have values. We usually have a lot of values. Companies have values printed and almost like, framed at times. But what does it really mean to have these values? And I wanted to start out with sharing around the value of speaking the truth. And I feel how I see that value manifest in Dalberg Design is on a lot of projects, we set out with certain, say, scope or problem areas. And those problem areas at the beginning are something that we, of course, work through with our clients, and we agree on a certain approach to take. Sometime during the process, you do realize that the ground reality can be different, maybe slightly, maybe a lot, and hence the scope of the project needs to either shift or change. And there have been so many examples at Dalberg where we have had to actually say no to a client, or say no to something very lucrative that may have led to better partnerships, but actually may not be serving the last mile need that we are set out to do. And I think to me as an individual, that really matters as to how do we speak the truth and how do we speak truth to power rather. I'm going to also call out my colleagues here to see how they see some of these values manifest at work, or how do they bring those values at work. So Ido, would you like to share one?
Sure. Thank you, Sanjukta. And actually, speaking the truth was one of the ones that really resonated with me too. So thanks for stealing that.
You can
so
say
I think
that as
the
well.
I think the other one that really resonates with me is showing empathy, and I think this is core to the work that we do through HCD. I mean, it requires us to actually, you need to place yourself in the shoes or the position of the person that you're building a product or service for. And I mean, this empathy goes a long ways, not just in the work that we do. I think if you practice empathy on a daily basis, not just through work, it shows, and it comes through in different ways. Even the way you work with your colleagues, the way you interact with your friends and family, right? So for me, empathy is a big one. If you can truly practice and be empathetic with people that interact with, not necessarily at work, even in your daily life, I think it just makes you a better person. Makes you, you become more understanding. You're not rational, and you try to bring people along, because you understand where they're coming from. So for me, that really stands out. Yeah, and I'll pass it over to Male to share with us.
Oh God. Okay. I want to talk about putting impact first, because I think sometimes we solve the part of that value that is like, okay, what is impact for us and how do we work towards impact? But we forget that impact is about our values as well. And what do we hold as important to us as humans and as designers, and how that it's reflected in our work, in the projects that we select. So I will say that I try to remind myself about my values and the things that are important, and bring those to the field, bring those to my studio, bring those to the conversations when we decide, do we work with this client or not? Do we work on this project or not? And I think that really have shaped my design practice. Like every time, like, oh, look at that shiny, beautiful thing that we should be doing. And I'm like, okay, does this align with my values? No, maybe not. So like I course correct. And I think we have had the space to do that at Dalberg, and it has been really important in my experience.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that also like totally resonates with me. And I just wanted to jump in and share another one that I feel also is resonates with me a lot actually, is the reframing of problems as possibilities. A lot of times we see a problem and a challenge, and we see it as a barrier, or something that hinders us from achieving what it is we want to achieve. But in truth, a challenge is an opportunity, right? So all of these solutions that we have nowadays, they were built to address a certain challenge. And so what we do a lot through our work is always, reframing challenges into opportunities or possibilities. So how might we, right? If there's a challenge, so how might we overcome this? How might we fix that, right? And this just broadens your perspective and your approach into, how you're solving the problems. And it just gives you also kind of like a positive outlook. So you're not just always looking on the negative. So yeah, that's something else I just wanted to chip in there.
Great, thanks for those share outs. I'm going to quickly just share an overview of the kind of work we do across sectors. And there is a lot of more detail and examples on our website, so please feel free to go there and check it out after this if you haven't already. However, Dalberg Design focuses a lot on agriculture, and I know that our Nairobi studio champions a lot of that portfolio on ag. There is a lot of work that is happening in gender and financial inclusion in the Mumbai studio. Also at the intersection of technology and gender, because there is a lot of work that we do around how the gender gap actually widens in the online space, and how can you actually make online spaces much more safer for women, as which can be a much uh, I don't want to say easier, but a place with much more opportunities in the online space rather than in the real world, where the norms and culture shifts are even harder to do. And then, of course, there is a lot of work that we do in education to employment, skill development, capacity building, not just at the end beneficiary level, but also with our clients, keeping in mind that we work in a consulting model, but what happens to our clients once we leave? Are they set up for success in order to take things forward? We have a very big portfolio in health and nutrition. Some of our clients in Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID, in terms of foundations, but also social enterprises, NGOs, and governments that we work on health and nutrition strategy and design. Um, so those are some of the focus areas that Dalberg Design has in our work, but there is so much more. I encourage you to go and check onto the website. So in the interest of time, I'll stop here on this and hand it over to my friend Ido Duncan to take us through the value of human-centered design.
Cool. Thank you, Sanjukta. Since you're in control of the controls, I guess, I think this will be my signal to move to the next slide. Awesome. Cool. So what is the value of human-centered design? I mean, I want to believe that a lot of the folks that we have on this call already know what HCD or human-centered design is. But also at the same time, you know, I believe there are folks who don't know what it is, right? So I guess for the benefit of the people who don't know what human-centered design is, just to give a quick definition or explanation of what it is before we talk about the value, is so the human-centered design, or HCD, a lot of people call it that because I guess we get lazy trying to pronounce the full name. So basically, it's a way of places the people aside, so your users, you know, it could be anyone really, and other important stakeholders at the center of the design or implementation process, right? So it allows you to actually, you know, if you put all these, if you focus on the users or the people that you're trying to design a service or a product for, it actually allows you to gather insights into people's, you know, their capabilities, their behaviors, needs, and challenges that can be crucial for the adoption and usage of a product or service. So actually shifting the mind from just thinking about your product and your service by, you know, starting to bring in the user from early on, even testing your assumptions, right? Because you might think, oh, you know, you have a great idea, you know, you see an opportunity, right? But this is just from your perspective. You know, it's great to always go out there and start talking to the people that you think this challenge or this problem, what do you call it, affects, right? And understand how their lives are, how this problem, those challenges affects them, on what are the things that actually contribute to this. And you might actually find that some of your assumptions or hypotheses can be wrong. So it's important to take their perspective into account from a very, very, very on into the project or the process. So moving on to the value of HCD, right? So HCD incorporates, it incorporates an interdisciplinary research approach. We've talked about that at Dalberg Design, we're not just, all designers. We bring in skill sets and capabilities from different disciplines. And so all of this is incorporating HCD through also a design and creative facilitation methodology to engage a variety of stakeholders across an ecosystem. So it could be, your end users. It could be partners at the decision-making level. It could be folks even at the back-end level who are building the product. So it's important to bring in all their perspective throughout this product development journey. And also the other thing I'd like to mention is that it is a participatory approach. So when we engage users, we're not just, like we're doing here, as much as we are speaking, and, we can engage you guys through, posting your questions via chat or asking questions. We like to actually sit down with the users, put down, for example, like a worksheet. Of course, we have like an interview guide, but make it very participatory, so they don't feel like we're just extracting information from them, but they're also part of this process, right? So they are also adding value and learning a lot more about the challenges or the problems that they're facing. So that is that in terms of value of HCD. And so what we try to do throughout this process, right, is to build a product or a service that sits at the intersection of desirability, viability, and feasibility, right? So people have to want it, right? We're not just pushing a product, but this is a product that actually fits the needs and challenges of the people you're trying to serve. And it has to be viable, right? It needs to be in a way that people can actually use it, see value and impact in it, and also has to be feasibility. It has to have feasibility. Sorry. So what we try to do, and every time when we go out to the field, and the objective of going through this process of HCD is to make sure that whatever product or service that we're building sits at this intersection of these three things that I've talked about. So this is a quote from Don Norman. I'm not going to read the whole quote. I believe we can see the screen. So Don Norman is a researcher and an author. I think his well-known book is called The Design of Everyday Things, right? And here he talks about this process, which the technical name for is task analysis. Where we carefully conduct observations of how the tasks are being done, supported, and performed by different people through a design process. But in essence, this HCD, basically, I think what he's trying to convey here is that we practice HCD in different ways, but we just don't know or call it HCD. So HCD is just a terminology that's been coined. I think quite recently, and it's very new in many regions of the world. But I think if you look at through the history of product or service development, people have practiced HCD in many ways. So this is just another way that we're formalizing it and bringing in like different kinds of methodologies. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. So how does this process work, right? So this process, like I said, is the first thing is actually going out and meeting people where they are, where they work, where they live, right? To understand, how are their lives, how do they interact with different stakeholders in the environment, and basically this is, I think, a lot of our work involves leaving the offices where we're sitting to actually go meet people out where they live, at their farms, at their workplaces. To understand holistically, right? So, what are their needs and challenges? We don't come in, through like one lens. We try to look at other things that also might affect somebody's decision or behavior in adopting or using a service, right? So if you're looking at financial inclusion product, for example, you might want to also understand, some of the competing financial demands, right, which might actually affect how somebody saves or spend their money. And you might actually get insights that are critical to how you design or develop your product by looking at their lives holistically. And the last piece, like I mentioned, it is a participatory approach. So whenever we're trying to design interventions or solutions, we try to make this a co-creation exercise, right? So we put down like low fidelity prototypes, engage the users in understanding the user experience, and if there's a challenge, we quickly co-create ideas or solutions. And through this approach, we can be agile, and we can iterate actually very quickly when you're out there in the field, to come up with solutions that actually make an impact in the adoption and uses of a service or a product. Cool. I'll give it back to you, Sanjukta.
Thanks for that super in-depth process insight. I think there is an interesting question that I would love to weave in here. Male, would you like to just share quickly what that question is? I'm sorry, I'm unable to see Slack.
Yeah, so Justin is asking, do your design teams usually use HCD to get to a strategic conceptual outcome and that hand off the project for implementation engineering? Or do your teams move all the way from research to ideation to development to implementation?
That's a great question, and I think it fits perfectly as to what we're going to talk. So, traditionally there is this end-to-end process of HCD, from developing a hypothesis to finding insights, then trying to weave in the opportunity areas, building some concepts or prototypes, testing, iterating, solution, maybe piloting somewhere there, and then final recommendation. So while that's the traditional way of looking at it, and it's a great question, so thanks for it. The thing is that it's not always linear for us, and it always depends on who the client is, where they are in their journey, what is our capability, and hence where is that meeting point of what they need where they are, and hence what can we do. So a lot of times it's not that we start with research and then create prototypes. To your point, yes, we do that on a lot of projects, to do like foundational research to actually kind of gain some insight. So for example, we recently worked with the government of Ethiopia, which Duncan was part of that project, and he should actually be talking more about it. But when we were working on the employment scenario, there was no data. So we had to do a lot of foundational research to understand what's the landscape like, what are the aspirations of young people, and how do they look at employment, and how is employment leading to aspiration, right? So yes, that definitely is a lot of what you're saying around strategic conceptual outcome and then hand off the project implementation. Then there are other projects where we worked with a fintech startup who had a product almost ready, like 70% ready, and we did a 2-week sprint with them to just test the almost go-to market ready product and give them last round inputs on how the UI should actually work if they had to launch in the Indian market. So long story short, there is no one model based on what the project is. That's what we decide, and that's that's how I'm going to explain this slide as well. So yeah, quickly moving on, how we do that is a wide range of methods, from social sciences, behavioral sciences, to Duncan's point, the agile product development, systems thinking. There is this wide spectrum of strengths that we have within the design team. And then how that manifests in the project cycle is, a lot of times we do foundational research where we work with the communities to uncover what are some of the hidden aspirations, motivations, behaviors, why they do what they do. Work with experts to really quickly accelerate our learnings of an ecosystem to then scope a project. We also do a lot of creative facilitation and co-design. So basically convene all the important people in a room who need to be, build, potentially forge partnerships in service of designing solutions that work. A lot of rapid iterative prototyping, messaging and behavior change, communication. Definitely what Ido was saying, look at it from an ecosystem perspective, but how do we map the ecosystem in order to really understand and appreciate the nuance of what we are trying to do. Similarly, a lot of behavioral sciences inputs that we have on really looking at the psychometrics of the decision-making process that people do, and hence how might solutions nudge them towards positive outcomes. So it's like a wide gamut of offerings that we have. With that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Duncan, who will take us through few very quick project examples. We are going to like highlight one thing about that project so that we can make time for questions.
Cool. And actually, Male is going to kick us off with this project.
Yeah, sorry, I was reading all the questions. So this project was based here in the US. It was for the Financial Health Network and the AARP Foundation. And the AARP Foundation works with adults that are already retired or about to retire. And they were really interested in understanding how low and middle income adults over the age of 50 interact with technology and how that interacts with their finances, because they are facing unique challenges regarding managing their finances and moving forward with a sustainable life plan. But most of the tools that are out there are designed for millennials. So this population was being left behind. So what we did was do a lot of qualitative research and come up with a journey to pinpoint how to shift the LMI 50 plus current emotions and needs into like negative emotions into positive emotions, and that financial service providers could design for in their digital products for this population.
Cool. All right. Digifarm. Digifarm is actually one of my favorite projects. I think when I joined Dalberg in 2017, this is when Digifarm was kicking off. And Digifarm has gone a long way and actually, has become quite of a success story here in Kenya. So what is Digifarm? Digifarm, has been in development, like I said, from 2017, and this has been through a collaboration of Dalberg, Masico, through the AgriFin Accelerate program, as well as Safaricom, to build a commercially viable platform to support the needs and challenges of farmers to improve the lives of smallholder farmers here in Kenya. So what it is it is a USSD platform, and this is because looking at it from the lens of who we're trying to serve. So most farmers in rural Kenya, they don't own smartphones, right? So they own feature phones, basic phones. So we had to build a product that actually is accessible to them based on the devices that they have. So this product is a USSD platform, which basically allows farmers to access information or education on best farming practices. It also has information about weather patterns, and also gives them access to input credit. And it's not just credit. For example, they don't get cash. They get credit in terms of inputs that they use in the farm. And this is also based on the research that we did, that just giving out cash as credit for farmers to do what it is they want to do with. A lot of the times, they do have competing needs. And for example, if somebody's sick, or there's one of the kids who needs school fees, that money can be channeled to something else that it was not meant for. So through this, we designed this input credit for farmers, where they actually get just input that they can use in the farms, whether it's seeds or fertilizers, for the amount of money that they had applied for, requested for. And also a new feature that is being piloted right now is for the farmers to be able to access market for their farm produce. It's great to give them education. It's great to give them access to inputs, which these two things combined improves their yield at the end of the season. But the other challenge is, if they don't have a market to sell their produce, then that's another big problem. And so another feature of this platform is this market access feature. which is being piloted right now, where farmers can connect with buyers, actually have a contract with the buyer. And this is a committed buyer who at the end of the season will be able to buy the farm produce in whatever quantity that they had agreed. So if you can, I'm sure if you go online, there's a lot of information on DigiFarm. I would encourage you to go check it out. So this is one of my favorite projects, and this is when I actually started engaging a lot with farmers. So that is DigiFarm. We can quickly move on to the next project, which this project happened in India. So using the behavioral and psychological segmentation data in India, we Dalberg, leveraging also, there's another project that we did called the Human Account, which I'd encourage you to also check out. I think the URL is thehumanaccount.com, which is a segmentation project. So through this, the data from this project, we were able to design a strategy and a set of financial products to meet the deeper needs of different types of consumers in India. And through this work, one of the outputs was a flexible goal-based saving scheme for female users or customers or segment. And this segment, segments actually leverages financial behavior was, the challenges that there was infrequent savings due to reliance on husbands for income. And this is kind of a culture thing, I think when you go from one region to another, they have different cultural practices. And, one of the aspect of the culture in India is that, the husband controls a lot of the financial income. We basically profile their psychological needs, characterized by the low trust in institutions in India, and also their consciousness, which was also low, and also low planning ability. And this, I think, touches a lot on just, the capacity or the capability or the empowerment of, for example, women in this sector, and being able to design products or services that actually address their needs, as much as it is complex. Because you can imagine, right, if you're dealing with things that are cultural, things that are really rooted in people's lives, and you're trying to introduce a product to empower women, for example, and they're not really empowered in the community, you can get into a lot of complex issues and challenges. So through HCD and through this project, we were able to design flexible financial products for women.
I have a question before we move on. It's from Raisa, and it says, could you share how, you have talked about understanding the holistic person. Could you share how that fits into project scoping and client priorities? For example, in the original scope of the project or client is a specific type of project with certain goals. So how understanding the holistic person.
Can you repeat the question?
How we talked about understanding the holistic person, and how is that? How do we fit that when we scope our project, or how does it fit when client priorities?
Cool. Yeah, that's a good question. So I think in terms of scoping, right? So we of course have topics or things that we want to focus on when you're going into the project, and this is of course things that we include in the scope. But through this approach, we also try to make sure that we touch on other things that might actually be affecting people's behaviors or perceptions, or even driving their decisions in terms of how they're going to use or adopt a product. So you might go in through a certain perspective, but what we're saying is don't get locked in that perspective. You need to broaden your perspective and understand holistically, what are their needs, what are the challenges, what is the environment, right? And some of these things actually might not, you might not be able to capture that in scoping. But when you're doing research, it's important to make sure that you pretty much cover everything. I don't know if that answers your question.
Duncan, maybe I can just add a specific example. I think, Raisa, if I understand your question, like how does defining a holistic person feed into the scoping? A lot of times it may not in the beginning, but I think to Duncan's earlier point that revisiting or reframing problems as opportunities is something that really has a big play here. So for example, the last project that Duncan was voicing over on creating a savings product for women in India, there is so we were working with a certain client that was about to become a payments bank in India, and they were trying to understand how they can leverage their existing infrastructure to May I request, if you're not speaking, if you can mute? We hear some background noise from someone. So yeah, so one of the examples of how we looked at it, to your question, Raisa, is our client had a very how may I be polite about this, but a very archaic sense of the role of women, right? So when through our primary research and survey and bringing in a behavioral lens, we actually categorize these women in villages, a certain type of women in villages, as risk takers, right? And as a result of that, in an intermediary stage, when we went back to our client and said that, hey, we think your savings product should actually address this segment of women who are risk takers, our client was very surprised because women are not necessarily categorized as risk takers, right? So hence, how are we even profiling them as risk takers? What makes them risk takers? Which is them being the only family members who do not earn, but are the only family members who actually save. They have a regular savings behavior, and hence their willingness to engage with a new product that actually enables them to save by building on their existing savings behavior actually makes them a bigger risk taker than their husbands who are earning, right? So that definitely changed the scope of our project to then look at decision making, because traditionally it's very easy to categorize men as decision makers, right? But here that was not the case. So that's another example. Any other questions that stand out to you, Malay?
I'm reading some. There's some more on background. There's some more regarding the application. So if you want to move to the next section, I can ask you more questions.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
So yeah, what are the opportunities? Quickly to repeat from our, sorry, I'm trying to move this. But from our beginning of this call, that there is a lot of detail that I encourage you, all of you, to go and check out in terms of the roles, responsibilities, and expectations. We definitely look at three basic aspects within the design team. All of us are definitely practitioners in our own sense and collaborators with our colleagues, but also clients, and amplifiers in the sense that we are advocating for the approach that we take in service of meeting the needs of our clients, but also the end beneficiary, where they are and not where we think they should be. And with that, we have a very wide set of skills, which is around design, which is communication, visual, UX, industrial design, service design, etc. But also a lot of participatory research, behavioral sciences, strategy consulting that we talked about, and definitely one of the focus areas being global health, education and employment, justice, equity and mobility, agriculture, financial inclusion. Coming to what we are all here for is the 2020 fellowship applications, which are open on the website. Please note that the timelines actually vary by the studio. So does the role, so please go and read them. And I guess now we should create some space for questions.
Yeah, I have some. So you mentioned the Nairobi office focus on agriculture. Is that the only sector of focus in that region, or is it possible to be involved in different sectors? And is not having experience on that particular sector a disqualifier for the design roles?
Over to you, Duncan.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the projects in Nairobi are farming oriented, because I think if you look at the region, a lot of the folks in East Africa and Africa at large are farmers, and we work with most of the time with local communities, right? So a lot of our work, just based on the way the occupation of the people in this region is, that we work with a lot of farmers. But that's not the only sector that we work in, right? So we folks in the Nairobi studio also work a lot in the public health sector, youth employment, organization learning, for example. So it cuts across many sectors. And you could be based, for example, in Nairobi, but you could be working on a project with folks from another studio, in India or the US or in UK or whatever other region that you're doing your research, right? So as much as most of the work in the Nairobi studio is farming oriented, that's not the only thing that we do, and it's not it's not a key thing that we basically use to assess qualifications of applicants, right? So like it's been shared already. We look at many things, many disciplines, as long as it complements what we're doing here at Dalberg Design.
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry, I just wanted to quickly address, there are a lot of questions around deadlines. The only reason we are not talking about them is, okay.
Deadlines are up, so maybe we'll share that.
We'll share the deadlines. They will be updated on the website. So please stay tuned. The Mumbai deadlines are actually in the job descriptions. So we won't be taking any further questions on deadlines and prioritize a few others. Please go ahead, Malay.
There's one here. Are you looking more for graduate students or recent undergrads?
So a short answer is, again, please look at the JDs. It does call out very specifically whether there are certain roles, if I'm not wrong, that are looking at undergrad students. Is that correct, Malay?
Yeah.
And then there is a lot of other roles that seeks work experience. So there is no one answer. Please go read the JDs online.
There are like many questions coming up. So what are the opportunities after the fellowship?
I would love for Malay and Duncan to share from their experiences.
Yeah. Do you want to start? You go and I read more questions.
Okay. Opportunities after fellowship. So I think just quickly reflecting on the last fellowship, in Nairobi studio, we had 2 fellows. And at the end of the fellowship, they both got full-time employment. So ideally, the objective of this fellowship is, of course, to engage and try to identify talent that we can then nurture, support, and if it looks like something that can become of interest to both parties, and there is value in it, then of course the opportunity for full-time employment is very it's very real, right? So, but if it doesn't work out, of course, it's also a good experience for you to learn from Dalberg Design, from the folks who work there, from the experiences, and hopefully at the end of that fellowship, if it doesn't work out, you have some experiences that you can take forward with you. And the thing is, that does not mean it's the end of that engagement. We can always continue the conversation through other channels. If you're looking for a fixer, for example, and you fit, within that profile of a fixer that can help us or collaborate with us on a project, then definitely, there's opportunities to also work in those kinds of capacities.
Yeah, and because of time, I'm gonna move to some portfolio questions. So regarding the portfolio in the application link, what is expected in this section? And Will applications with a portfolio be given preference? Are there other formats in which we could showcase our work, such as case studies?
Sorry, can you repeat the first question again?
What is expected from the portfolio application? Like it's the thing that they have to submit on that link.
It's usually work that you have done, of course, but something that we like is to really also portfolio that shows how you think. So not necessarily just end outcomes that look nice, but also showcase your thought process. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, sure. I think the JDs also mention a size, like the file size of each of your portfolios. Please keep that in mind because at our end, it actually gets really hard to open the portfolios. Yeah, so just keep the file size in mind.
Would case studies work as portfolio?
I don't think it's a yes or no question. If you have worked on them, I guess, and if it demonstrates the work you have done, if it's a case study on something else that you haven't worked on, maybe not a very strong part of your portfolio. I don't know. What do you people think?
No, I agree with you. I think if it demonstrates, your thought process, some of the skills that you think are valuable, then for sure. And of course, it has to be a project that you're involved in. I think that goes without saying.
I remember when I was applying, I was like, what does it mean to show how I think? I think portfolios sometimes just show the shiny, nice final outcome of your project, but sometimes it fails to tell the story and like the important pieces of information that led you to that beautiful end. So including some of that, I think it's what we're looking for.
Yeah, thanks for that clarity.
They're showering me with questions.
I'll take one while you read. Go ahead, sorry.
There's one about graphic design. Like, do we value that? Does it give more points for people that have visual design skills?
If you're applying for the graphic or visual design position, yes. Which is why I would again encourage you to go back and read the details of the fellowship positions. If you're applying for another position, the skills, the responsibilities that you will have as a fellow is very, very clearly articulated.
Okay. Here's a good one. I'm potentially very open about the location of the fellowship. Does it help to indicate an openness, or is it better to focus on only one location? Also, does your nationality have an impact on which location is more suitable?
So the visa question has been a recurring question for us. And like I mentioned in the beginning, every year the studio needs shift. So for example, Mumbai studio had someone from the US this year, besides two other fellows. And depending on the situation, we do or do not sponsor a visa. Again, if the fellow is someone who really matches our needs, they feel the same way about us of taking that call, because I'm sure it's a big move for them. And if we feel very, very confident that for a 3-month engagement, we want to do that. But those are very big exceptions. Usually, we don't necessarily always prioritize sponsoring visas. But I'm curious, Malay and Duncan, if you have any other thoughts. We can also take this question on a studio by studio basis based on their history and need and where they are through their point people.
I agree with you 100%. So I think the priority is folks who are based in the local studio region. And it doesn't have to be necessarily people who are citizens of that country. So nationality is not really a factor. As long as you're based in that region, then we consider you to be local, and basically don't need papers for immigration to come in and live in that region of that office that you're applying to.
Yeah, for the US, as you know, there's like another set of complexities right now there. But from what I know and my experience, sponsorships are available after a full-time offer has been um, granted, um, and not necessarily just for fellowships, since those are like shorter engagements that actually wouldn't even let you apply for a work visa with those shorter engagements.
Right.
Yeah, and it is an expensive process, right? You know, like in Kenya, it costs a lot to actually be able to get the legal papers to work here. So it's a significant investment that either you have to make on your side, and to be honest, it's something that the company cannot do for fellows unless it's a very special case. So I agree 100% with Amalia as well. So this mostly happens with fellows or people who are coming on full time.
Great.
I
I'm cognizant of time, so we will be sticking around for answering questions. If people have to drop, we will completely understand. But I'm guessing you're okay extending a little bit given there are so many questions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There are a couple of good ones of like, how does the day in the life of a fellow looks like? What makes a successful fellow? And do fellows have formal feedback sessions? Do they have a manager that they can have a one-on-one relationship with?
I can start with the last one. Do fellows have formal feedback sessions? So I did not come on as a fellow, I was a contractor, but this is true for fellows as well. Fellows are, when fellows come on board, they are no different from employees. While expectations in their roles are defined, of course, say a senior designer expectation will be very different from a fellow's expectation. But when you're working as an employee. There you are no less responsible because you're a fellow, which is why you would also see the experience that we're asking for. Can I actually request to mute if you're not speaking? Or I don't know if this is my side. Um, yeah. So yes, we have a very formal semi-annual review, which happens like the one mentions twice a year, and every employee of Dalberg Design goes through a formal feedback process from everyone that they have worked with, and fellows are not an exception. So the amount of investment we do in terms of growth for fellows is also very much similar to what we would do for an employee. But yeah, what does a day in the life of a fellow look like?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, that's a difficult one to answer. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess if you if you look at it from a project perspective, in terms of the expectations of what is required from a fellow, on a day-to-day basis, I wouldn't answer the question, but more from like a high level. You know, usually the requirements are based on your experience, your capabilities, and it could cut across many things, but most of the time the fellow is supporting the designer and the senior designer in a project, either through documentation, of course through synthesis, as well as designing and planning for the research. The experience, I would say, is great, just based on the feedback that we've got from other fellows. Myself, like I said, I was not a fellow. I was a fixer and a translator coming in. But in terms of experience, Dalberg is a fantastic place to work, and the experience is awesome. And please, if you can't reach out to other people who work at Dalberg to get their feedback, just to confirm if I'm not being biased, then please go ahead.
Yeah, there are another set of like miscellaneous questions on how much is the stipend? Is it just 3 months? Blah, blah. And I know that varies from studio to studio. And you had a strategy to answer these questions.
Yeah. So 3 months is something that we have also arrived at over the years. And there's a reason behind that, which is while we are also asking a lot from the fellows in terms of the kind of role and experience that we want them to be of, we want them also to have a experience where they feel that they have been able to involve deeply on projects, but also in studio building, getting to know their colleagues and have them experience the culture. And nothing less than 3 months has really worked well. On an average, they get to then at least do one project, participate in some internal studio work, participate in team events, and feel that they have been able to contribute, which is why minimum 3 months, but the upper limit has always varied because anyone who has been a fellow, each fellowship experience is different, each fellowship journey is different. There have been people who have gone on to extend their fellowships from 3 months to 6 to 9 months. People have gone on to either going from fellowship to full time right away. Sometimes people go on to become contractors after fellowships. Every journey is very unique, but 3 months mainly because we want it to be a very tangible experience both ways for Dalberg Design as well as the fellow. On the stipend bit, again, it's very, very different for each location. What we commit minimum to say here definitely is that it will definitely cover your living wages, where, you know, if, for example, if you're moving or if you are even within the same city, it covers the expenses for your living, rent, accommodation, etc. Now, beyond that, it's a very role by role and studio by studio conversation, depending on how experienced the fellow is, and hence how, and even if they are not, do they really match the role? What are they bringing to the table? What's the need that the organization has, the studio has? So it's a very, very fellow to fellow, studio to studio, where they are in the journey kind of conversation beyond the covering your life expenses.
Um, that's mostly all. These are all the only positions we have. Are there others? There are just two in the Nairobi studio. Are you looking for two fellows, or is like more fellows within each one of those roles?
I think all of this is information is on the link in terms of the positions that are available. So, like Sanjukta said, please, go check out the link, and I'm sure you'll find out more information. And if you do have any other questions that maybe you feel you don't get an answer from the materials online, you can always reach out to us, and I think we'll have our contact details at the end of this presentation.
Perfect. So that was my last two questions. Like, where are we gonna post the video to this webinar, and how can they contact us?
Oh, where are we going to post the video of the webinar, and how can they contact us? So we will definitely get back on that, given that we did not really expect 89 people to join this call. We do have, by the way, we do have a Dalberg Design YouTube channel. We'll definitely post on that channel, so feel free to look up Dalberg Design. But now that we know that so many people have joined, maybe figure out a better way to get back in touch with you on the video bit.
Yeah. Does it make sense? I don't know if we have the details of everyone's email addresses, or if they can quickly just type in the email address in the chat section, and then
Right.
I guess we can reach out to them in terms of how they can get the video.
Anita has another solution instead, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So I think I can leave my email address in the chat group right here. And yeah, if you need a copy of the video, you can email me and I'll be happy to share it with you.
So please reach out to Anita if you want a copy of the video. Look at the YouTube channel where it will be uploaded soon. Yeah.
I'm gonna answer the last question. That is the social justice for design position more based on visual design? So this one is a New York specific, and social justice is not focused on visual design. Is focused on um, working with communities here in the States. And like all the things that can, like from food deserts to racial issues to financial inclusion. And we will be, for this role, we will be prioritizing applicants that have some experience working in these sectors and working with communities in the US, in whatever sector that relates to social mobility and social impact.
Great. Back to you again, Male, I guess.
um I think, yeah, like there, like guys, there are a lot of questions on the number of fellowships and things like that. Go to our website, dalbergdesign.com, and you can see there the positions that are open, how many positions are open per studio, what we are requiring for each one of those positions. And basically that's like the Bible for this fellowship program. If you don't feel you fit into any of these positions or into a fellowship program, we always have open our general application process for openings, like, and those can lead to two ways: to a potential full-time work when we have the bandwidth, or to put you in our contractor pool. That's another way to engage with us. So I will say again, like, go to the website, read all of that. If that information is not enough on the fellowships that we have here, you can always contact us again.
May I add one last quick thing? As you can see that it's a very lean and small team. We do take a lot of care in making sure that the time that you have put in applying for fellowships, we do respect that. So please be patient with the timelines. Once you apply, you will hear from us. Sometimes you will experience delays because we are just taking the time to make sure that we have read through everything. Having said that, please do make sure that you have read the details of the roles, like Male said, so that you're not applying for the wrong position. Applying to multiple positions doesn't necessarily increase your chance, does not increase your chances at all, because we are very specific in the role. So please apply for what you are eligible for, which you can gauge at your end once you read the roles. Yeah.
I had one very quick thing to add. For those of you who've inquired about the deadlines for a couple of positions, I'd request if you could check the website again tomorrow. I know that's a very important piece of information that's missing for some of the roles. So we'll make sure to update that by tomorrow this hour. So if you all could check the website again once for the deadlines, that would be great. Over to you, Mani.
I think that's it. We answer most of the questions. People are starting to say thank you so much and like saying goodbye to us. So I think it's time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, happy application.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much for your questions. Again, feel free to contact us if you need more information. And yeah, looking forward to see all your portfolios.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye everyone. Good luck.